Usopp is popular for a reason. And I understand. I used to like him too, and I still do. But now, at this point in the story, I don't think Oda likes him very much. I personally used to quite like Usopp, for the same reason that many other people like him. He's the most human character in the crew. He's one of the two characters, along with Nami, that doesn't have any superhuman powers, and that leads to a lot of insecurity, cowardice, hesitation, and frankly, relatability. Not all of us have the physical fortitude of the monster trio, or the mental strength to persevere through extreme hardship like Robin or Brooke. While Usopp doesn't have the most tragic backstory, it is one that is extremely believable, and one that could potentially happen to any of us. That is part of what also makes Usopp a very understandable and sympathetic character. That is a great setup for any character, in my opinion. And Oda definitely does some amazing work with it. Usopp was an incredibly sympathetic, or at least understandable character during the Water 7 saga. He projected his own insecurities onto the well-being of the ship. That's why he got incredibly defensive, even as early as Jaya and Skypia, when other crew members would mention to him how they might have to start looking for a new ship. Because if they could start looking for a new ship, it meant that Merry, his biggest contribution to the crew, was replaceable. It meant that he was replaceable. The eventual clash with Luffy was inevitable, and the way the previous arcs built up to that, for that to finally culminate in Water 7, was peak character writing. The moment when he challenges Rob Lucci, that moment was amazing. It sent chills down my spine. Until that moment, he had only used his outrageous lies to shield himself from harm, but in this scene, he provokes the CP9 agent into a fight to save Luffy, not himself. Every moment that Usopp and Sogeking had in Water 7, I thought was unbelievably good. When he cries in frustration at having failed the crew, when he masks his face to hide his tears at witnessing the death of Merry, when he begs for Luffy's forgiveness at the shores of Water 7, I fully understood the range of emotions that he was going through. That's not to say that Usopp stopped being relevant then and there. Thriller Bark demonstrated that despite his flaws and pessimism, he was still very relevant and very important to the crew. When Luffy lost all hope in the world, Usopp demanded to go see him so that he could support his captain in his hour of need. He had truly come a long way from the loser who once demanded to be the captain of the crew. Not many other authors could pull off this level of character writing over such a long period of time, but Oda does a phenomenal job with Usopp, who absolutely deserves it, being one of the main characters of the series. In fact, the character writing for Usopp is almost second to none even within the Straw Hat Pirates. Or at least, it used to be. I personally believe that, for the lack of a better term, Usopp as a character has been neglected after the timeskip. I generally do not have any problems with Usopp before the timeskip, but the post-timeskip has not been kind to Usopp. It's just super unfortunate because I like Usopp. I think he has a lot of potential. Of all of the many arcs that have occurred post-timeskip, only one has functionally served Usopp with a zoom-in focus on his character and his development. And as we all know, that arc was Dressrosa. See, Usopp's journey starts with the Tontatas, who make him out to be their hero. The Tontatas, assisted by him and Robin, make a stand against Sugar and Treble, and get destroyed. Robin gets turned into a toy by Sugar, and everyone forgets about her. Usopp runs and abandons the Tontata tribe because he's scared and he doesn't want to die. But he hears the cries of his dwarf companions and he makes a comeback, admits that he lied to his allies, somehow beats Sugar and gets lauded as God Usopp from everyone that he saved. Sounds okay, right? Well, let's look at the bare bones of this. Usopp challenges an enemy. He and/or his allies go on the defensive. He runs away because he's scared. He regrets running, comes back, and redeems himself. Does that sound familiar? That's because it is. In his very first solo fight in the entire series, against Chu, he's obviously outclassed against a fishman, so he runs away, plays dead, and waits for Chu to leave. Then he regrets that decision because he has put his friends in danger, confronts Chu again, and wins the fight. In his tag team fight with Chopper against Mr. Four and Mrs. Merry Christmas, he gets scared and tries to abandon Chopper. Then Mrs. Merry Christmas insults Luffy, Usopp gets mad, defends his captain and his honor, devises a strategy to win, and wins. So basically, the scenario with the Tontatas has happened before, at least in its most basic form. And I'm not even saying that I don't understand him. Honestly, who wouldn't be scared in his situation? I don't blame him for being frightened. But it is extremely frustrating to see how on Shabondi post-timeskip, Usopp declares himself to be a strong, capable Straw Hat, which he definitely is when he puts his mind to it, and then in his one and only shining moment in the entire post-timeskip thus far, he does the exact same thing that he did in Kokoyashi Village and Alabasta. The thing that bothers me the most, however, is that obviously Oda was going for something more here, thematically. This was the first moment in which Usopp fought alone for something that was not himself or his crew, but the lives of those more vulnerable than he. Adding on to that, he was literally a giant compared to the Tontata dwarfs, which on a thematic level is something that Usopp aspires to be. He wants to be like the giants of Elbaf. And that is amazing. That is a huge step in his character. I just wish that Oda did not resort to the same formula that he has already used multiple times with Usopp, because it makes him look really bad. The theme matters, obviously, but the execution matters just as much, perhaps even more. And when Usopp's first crowning moment in the post-timeskip consists of him running away from his problems like he did on Arlong Park or Alaburna, no matter what the theme is, it feels repetitive and redundant, and it feels like nothing about his character has changed. This is one of the many instances in post-timeskip One Piece where Oda is conveying an extremely valuable and important theme through what I can only describe as a pretty bad execution. This applies to Katakuri's defeat in Flashback, Sanji's character journey in Whole Cake, or Haguardi's solo being alive. I'm gonna be honest, even though the themes are different, Punk Hazard makes Usopp look much better than he does in Dressrosa. I'm not a huge fan of the way Usopp regresses to a coward that's only brave against a fleeing opponent, but it was still really cool to see how he defended Luffy, and how he didn't doubt for a second that his captain would defeat Caesar. Yes, it is technically cyclical writing. It isn't anything new. At best, a callback to Alabasta, but honestly it was one of Usopp's crowning moments in the post-timeskip. It was one of his best moments. Yes, he was a coward for most of the arc, but at least he wasn't someone that made up egregious lies to make himself look better or to get out of difficult situations. You might argue that his cowardice is a fundamental attribute of his character, and he can't and doesn't have to change. Remember though, he has overcome his own cowardice several times already without even hesitating for a second. Such as in Water 7 when he challenges the Frankie family, Enies Lobby when he challenges Rob Lucci, and Thriller Bark when he manages to put himself in an appropriate headspace to take on Perona and Kumashi. I love the Perona scene, by the way, where he says that he's always negative. It's supposed to be a gag scene, but I think it's far deeper than that. Usopp is someone whose surroundings kick his ass time and time again, but he's also someone that can acknowledge that he's too incompetent, while still finding it in himself to stand up and challenge the mighty. It's fantastic. A lot of pre-timeskip moments were like this, not just for Usopp, but for the other Straw Hats as well. Because the crew was smaller, each member had more time to shine, and consequently, each character had more visible character development that was also extremely well executed. This goes for Zoro, this goes for Sanji, for Nami, for Robin, for everyone. Regarding the Dressrosa scene, you might argue that he also redeems himself when he saves Luffy and Law from Sugar, and fine, I'll give you that, I don't necessarily agree, but I can see how some people would see it that way. But speaking of, when did he use his newly obtained observation haki in Wano in an all-out war against two emperors and their respective crews in the biggest climax of the post-time skip thus far. Yeah, that's what I thought. Speaking of Wano, I understand that Usopp was one of the crew members who laid groundwork for Luffy's arrival in the country, but let's admit it, Zoro, Robin, Frankie all outshone him in that area. In fact, the most prominent scene that Usopp has in the entire arc is him running away from Ulti and Page 1 with Nami on Onigashima. Now, I really did not like this scene, especially the one where Nami says to Ulti that Luffy will definitely become Pirate King. Don't get me wrong, I loved Nami for saying that, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos. She's a legend. Usopp, not so much, because remember what he says right before? Usopp has been with Nami since almost the very beginning of the story. He, of all people, should know that Nami would never disrespect Luffy's dream, and yet he tells her to do so now? The worst thing is, though, contextually it makes sense. It makes sense that he would try to protect the lives of his crewmates. It is something that makes sense, but it also makes him look really bad just so that Oda can make Nami look really good. Because, here's the thing. Usopp would never have said this in pre-time skip One Piece, at least if he was the one in danger, and I doubt he would have encouraged his teammates in the same manner either. You only have to watch Alabasta to see how out of character that statement is for Usopp to even consider. What's really annoying though is that Oda didn't have to make him say anything. If Nami had just refused Ulti's threats unprompted, and the only thing that Usopp did was look up with a smirk on his face, I think that would have had basically the same effect without Usopp looking like a coward. Also, if I had got him to say what he said, then I would definitely have had him deal the final blow to Page 1 in some shape or another, just as Nami beat Ulti. Sure, he got an assist on Ulti, but you cannot tell me that is the same as Frankie beating Sasaki or Jinbei beating Who's Who. It is true that he saves some of the samurai towards the end of the arc and gives them a dressing down, which is good. The issue is that in the raid, which was 77 chapters in total, you'd expect him to do a little more. Don't get me wrong, not every character needs to do something important in every arc, but virtually every other Straw Hat did something more than him. You might argue that, hey, Elbaf is going to be Usopp's arc, and all of my criticism of his character is null and invalid and unwarranted because we haven't gotten there yet. Which is actually a rebuttal that I see quite often. Wait for Elbaf! Yeah, about that. There are two things that I would like to mention. Firstly, we already know Usopp's character very well. I shouldn't have to wait to critique his character for a storyline we hope is going to be his ultimate arc. Secondly, when you say Elbaf will be Usopp's arc, do you mean in the same way how Wano was Zoro's arc? Do you mean how Egghead was Frankie's arc? Thematically speaking, yes, absolutely, it would make sense for Elbaf to be Usopp's arc, seeing as how his journey has built up to a giant-centric one throughout the story. Hopefully, it will be. The thing is, though, as I said before, I liked Usopp, and I still do. I found him annoying at times, but I was also really happy when he got a chance to shine or redeem himself. You could definitely see him growing and maturing as a person throughout the pre-time skip, from a coward with a big mouth to a genuinely brave warrior of the sea. Unfortunately, it just doesn't feel the same way anymore. He is a caricature of the character he once used to be. He himself is a complete joke. His fights are gags. His development is cyclical. His resolve is fragile. And above all, his nose is long. Compared to the rest of the crew, Usopp is still an incompetent, gutless coward that, just like when he was first introduced, hides his obvious insecurities behind his obvious lies. I just find it super sad because Usopp is a great character with great potential. He had so much going for him pre-timeskip, and it feels like a lot of that has been thrown to the wayside. When people talk about how well written of a character he is, which is true, it's always Water 7, and always Enya's Lobby. It's always Thriller Bark. It's always the pre-timeskip moments. There's the saying, courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. And no other character embodies that in fiction more than Usopp. He is one of the most kind-hearted, relatable, and motivational Straw Hats with perhaps the most important and interesting journey for the audience, period. And I just wish that Oda gave him the same amount of love that he gives everyone else.